Good to see everyone today. We are getting toward the back end of our study. I think I got 3 or 4 weeks. I hope we can get back to some book, chapter, verse here before too much longer. I know some of y'all had mentioned, Brother Lloyd had mentioned studying some of the different religious groups and stuff like that. So if y'all still want to do that, we can do that as our next study.
Just a suggestion.
Well, if y'all are in favor of that, we can do that. I haven't got started putting that together yet, but that will give me something to do. But I really haven't delved into a lot of that myself too, so that'd be a good study for me as well. But
don't feel like you're already doing enough?
I'm not, brother. I'm not. All right. Last time we were looking at the idea of the dinosaurs, and people say that the dinosaurs and men are separated by millions of years, tens of millions of years. The evidence does not show that. They say that so much, people just swallow that hook, line, and sinker, don't question it, but that is not the case. So we showed you, of course, the dragon legends, the drawings you see, and so I want to hit just a couple more of this type of thing, and then something else interesting to me that I hope y'all find interesting is dinosaur footprints and human footprints in the same locations. And I watched something this morning, matter of fact, on YouTube, I'll tell you about if y'all are interested in that. So I think this is where we left off last time. I think we went through this, some of the sightings of sea monsters. And again, what were these sea monsters? Don't know. Obviously very impressive creatures. There have been sightings of a Cornish sea serpent in England. A 25-foot creature washed up on the shores of Normandy 10 years before D-Day in 1934. A 32-foot creature weighing 4,000 pounds was hauled up from a 900-foot depth off the coast of New Zealand in 1977. There are people in Australia that claim to have seen recent sightings of something that looks like a plesiosaurus. In 1994, a 39-foot carcass washed up on Russia's north coast after a storm. A creature called Issy was seen in Lake Akita in Japan. A creature called Uso has been seen in China. At Lake Okanagan, however you say that in British Columbia, an 80-mile-long lake, a creature known as Ogopogo has been sighted numerous times since 1872. It is said to be 20 to 30 feet long. A Cadborosaurus, a sea serpent nicknamed Caddy, has been seen off the coast of British Columbia all the way down to Oregon. At Cape Sable Island in Nova Scotia, off of Canada, a 40 to 50-foot creature chased a boat for a mile or two with its head about 15 feet out of the water. That'd be a little intimidating, a creature like that chasing you in a boat. Had a wide mouth and 4-foot tusk and pointed sharp teeth. His neck was 2 feet thick and about 6 feet long. It had a 9-inch diameter eyes with yellow-red circles around them. It has been seen 6 miles south of the island in water that was 180 feet deep and calm. At this lake, if y'all pronounce that, y'all can have at it, between Quebec and New York, 8 sightings by 26 different people occurred in 1992 of, again, a very impressive creature. A sea serpent has been spotted in the Potomac, nicknamed the Chesapeake Chessie. So I don't know if any of our senators and representatives have seen anything like that, but near Washington, D.C. A sea serpent in Boston was seen in the 1800s. In Rhode Island, an animal called the Block Ness monster was spotted as the nickname of that creature. Nessie is a monster in Lake Erie that was said to be between 16 and 25 feet long. A sea monster washed up in Massachusetts in November 1970. In Monterey, California, a 20-foot long creature washed up on the shore in 1925. And they've cited creatures like this in the area in the 1930s and 40s that they can't explain. The White River monster was seen in Arkansas in the 1970s. In Jupiter, Florida, a man flying 7 or 8 miles off the coast in the 1950s saw a 30-foot long creature. In Lake Champlain, between New York and Vermont, 58 people saw a creature there that was 30 to 35 feet in length and had 3 to 5 humps. In upstate New York, this lake is 400 feet deep in places. In Vermont, on the Vermont side, they've nicknamed the Lake Champlain monster as Champ. In July 1609, Samuel de Champlain, who founded the city of Quebec, was the oldest French settlement in North America, a year younger than Jamestown, Virginia, said that he saw a 20-foot serpent with a horse-shaped head and a body as thick as a keg. There have been sightings of similar creatures near Crown Point, New York. This one was interesting to me, and this is one Kent Hovind. I heard Kent Hovind tell this story, and he had interviewed the mother of one of these 5 people. So he talked to this mother who had no reason to lie about this, and told this story. Around Pensacola in 1963, 5 guys were scuba diving near a sunken ship called the Massachusetts. They saw a creature in the water with a very long neck and its head sticking above the water. They tried to swim to safety, but 4 of the 5 divers were eaten by the creature. Sightings of an animal like this have also occurred near Panama City. So somebody said, well, that's fabricated. It wasn't fabricated for the 4 guys that got eaten. And again, Kent Hovind describes it as a plesiosaurus type creature, a long neck, not far from us. So if you're swimming off our Gulf, maybe we ought to be on the lookout for something near us too. So again, amazing. So, we talk about the dinosaurs and these types of creatures are supposed to be extinct for millions of years. Are there some that have been sighted? Have there been some sightings of things like that today? I don't know. Is all that true? I don't know. I am convinced, though, whether these creatures exist today or not, I think they have existed until very recent times, and that's my belief. To the idea of the dinosaurs being young, again, thousands, not millions, soft tissue has been found in these dinosaur bones, and that's a pretty recent discovery, and I'll share that with you. A few years ago, from what I understand, the year I have in my mind is 1992. I think it was the 1990s when this discovery was made. A team of scientists cut a dinosaur bone in half to help in transporting it. It was so big they couldn't ship it in the boxes, so again, they weren't doing this to study it, but they were doing it for transportation. We're going to cut it and then we'll reassemble it. When they cut it, they were shocked by what they saw. There was soft tissue inside. There was ligaments and blood vessels and all this sort of thing in it. So they found soft tissue, stretchable material, blood vessels, and blood cells were found inside the dinosaur thigh bones. They found protein fragments in the bone and blood. Mary Schweitzer, who is not a creationist, she's an evolutionist, she didn't believe what she was seeing. She conducted the experiment 17 times to confirm her findings. And this was famous. It was published in the various publications that there's soft tissue in dinosaur bone. They can't debate this. So evolutionists admit this. Again, they're so blind to the truth, they'll say, we didn't know that soft tissue can last for 65 million years. It can't. So again, they're just blind to the fact that it's a fairly recent deal, but they refuse to believe it, even though there's soft tissue found in these things. So this proves that these things cannot be millions of years old, but a few thousand at most. Dinosaur blood, they say, cannot last more than 10,000 years. And you got this dinosaur blood in these bones. And dozens of these, from what I understand, again, they never had even thought to cut these things up and see. But dozens of these have been found since this time. The same thing, soft tissue inside of it. Even if frozen, even if you say, well, the dinosaur bones are frozen, and this was not in frozen climates that these were found, even if that was the case, DNA would be gone in less than a few million years. And they say, some of them say this is one of the biggest revelations in paleontology ever. And they refuse to see why this is the case, but it is. And again, dozens of these things have been found along that line. So dinosaur bones have been found that appear to be relatively fresh and unfossilized. Not fossilized. Again, if they're millions of years old, sitting open, you'd expect them to be fossilized. Not all of them are. Some of them are, but not all of them are. Some like these have been found along the Alaskan coast. And to the carbon-14 point that we made before, carbon-14 won't last a million years. Same thing that has carbon-14 in it, they won't test it that way. It has to be less than a million years old. But they find carbon-14 in these bones. 7 dinosaur bones are found from Montana, Canada, and Oklahoma. They were supposedly from the Cenozoic, Mesozoic, and Paleozoic source rocks. 5 different labs detected carbon-14 in all of these samples. Why do they have soft tissue in them? Again, they're not as old as what they say they are. They're not billions of years old, but they still won't change their narrative. These are some of the elements, and some of I can't pronounce, but some of the elements that they have found in these dinosaur bones. So blood vessels, red blood cells, hemoglobin, bone cells, various other things, unmineralized bone, collagen, DNA, skin pigments, etc. so on down the line. So again, how do you explain that? Well, they want to explain it by microbes produce those things. Again, that's not how it happened. So again, these things fit much better with the thousands of years that the Bible tells us than the millions of years that the evolutionists want to give us. Here's a couple of pictures of this. Again, this is fascinating to me. This soft tissue and blood cells have been found in T-Rex blood. Again, I didn't do that, but that was pretty neat. Again, here's the stuff. You see it stretched. They can soak it in water. It still stretches and it's flexible. These sorts of things. Again, this is things have been done with the various X-rays and different things have been taken. Pictures of these things that have been found. You see blood vessels was like blood cells still in the blood of these animals. This picture was taken of what appears to be red blood cells inside of a blood vessel. All tests to date have been consistent with the finding that red blood cell pigment, hemoglobin, is present. And how then? We ask the question, how can these things be millions of years old? They can't be. And so, again, dinosaurs, as I mentioned before, often used as kind of the poster child for evolution. Evolutionists love to tout the dinosaurs. I think it's one of our best friends and one of the best arguments we have for the Earth being much, much younger than what they try to tell us. Now, along that line, kind of the same line of thinking, dinosaur footprints that have been found. And share a few things about this with you. Why have dinosaur and human footprints been found in the same rock layers? Now, we know the answer to that is because they lived at the same time. They were created on the sixth day as we were, at least the land animals were. Human footprints have consistently been found in Carboniferous formations, supposedly 250 million years old, in Virginia, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Illinois, Missouri, among others. So human footprints, way down the layers, supposed to be 250 million years old. It's not 250 million years old, but that's their narrative. Human footprints have been found in ash that looks like people today who go barefooted all the time. Evidence of human and dinosaurs living together have been found in places like Russia, Brazil, Ica, Peru, Glen Rose, Texas, Charleston, South Carolina, Turkmenistan, a lot of other places like that. Again, in Turkmenistan, and in Arizona, you find dinosaur and human footprints. This is fascinating to me. In Glen Rose, Texas, I've never been there. There's a place called Dinosaur State Monument or something like that, or Dinosaur State Park. And so you can visit that. I don't know if any of y'all have visited that. I have not. But you can visit this and you can see the dinosaur footprints and all this. And I looked this up just to see. I'm going to share with you some things that I heard a speaker say on YouTube this morning, as a matter of fact, that was talking about this subject. If you look up Dinosaur State Park, they were talking about the dinosaur footprints billions of years ago that were made. And then, again, I read this. I was just curious to see what their narrative is, the official state narrative in Texas. And it did talk about the human footprints, and it talked about them being hoaxes. So if you look that up, that's what they'll say. People have fabricated this to encourage tourism and so forth to this area. Again, I want to share with you some things that somebody, a creationist who was leading some of the research, said about some of these things. In 1908, a flood of the Paluxy River near Fort Worth, Texas, ripped off the top layer of sediment surrounding the river. The bottom of the river was limestone. In that layer, in the layer underneath, hundreds of dinosaur footprints were found. And so everybody was really excited about this discovery. And so they sent that out and come see the dinosaur footprints. These were very big tracks. However, they frequently found human footprints 15 to 20 inches long next to the dinosaur prints. Some still have the dermal ridges in them, like the fingerprints, but the toe prints, that you could actually see that in the layer. Now, the size of it, Kent Hovind was talking about the size of these things, how large they were. The other guy didn't mention being as big as Kent Hovind said. According to Hovind, he said one of the human footprints was a size 24, showing a 6 or 7 foot stride between footprints, which would be a big human that was making that. But I won't get into that right now. But the fact they were human, nobody can debate that. They removed more limestone layers, and the prints continued, showing beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was not a fake or staged, although that is what evolutionists claim. The site is known as Dinosaur Valley State Park. So they'll talk about these things being staged, and I was listening to this guy named Don Patton. If y'all are interested in this, it's about an hour-long video. It's called Record of the Rocks. So you can get on YouTube, and it's about an hour. It's a two-part series, and the two things are together in this YouTube presentation. But he was in on this group, and that's what people are saying. Well, these human footprints have been forged. It's a hoax. It kind of went to the river and stopped. So he said it was, it got really, really dry in 2000. It did here too. I remember it didn't rain that entire summer until the very first football game. That came a big lightning storm, thunderstorm. But so it was very, very dry in Texas. And so the river kind of dried up, and they said, okay, well, let's look at this more. So they kept digging, and they found the human footprints continued under what was a layer that was covering this before. Again, it was not something that was staged or a hoax. So the trail was followed on tracks that were seen coming out of the river. A backhoe was used to uncover more soil, and the human tracks continued. The casts made of these tracks are very detailed. A human footprint was found inside one of these dinosaur tracks. And again, I was listening to him explain this again. There was an atheist named Glenn Kuban who had studied the ones that were shown before. And he came up with this explanation, said those things that looked like human footprints were really dinosaur footprints. So over time, it had, the waters and stuff had washed it out where it looked like a human footprint. When Glenn Kuban heard about this, he was in a presentation with Don Patton. When Don Patton was talking about this, he took a plane the next day and took a steel rod and started trying to destroy these things. So again, it shows you, they try to say we're all scientific. They don't want people to hear these things because it sets their theory on its ear. But that's sad. But they had cast of some of these preserved, and I don't think it showed all of them, but some of those that were the most impressive. Again, here's the YouTube presentation. I'll try to go through this real quick. But a guy named Don Patton, Record of the Rocks, very, very good presentation. So at this site, he said, Don Patton did, they found 134 dinosaur tracks with 14 human tracks in the middle. Right, left, right, you can see the pattern just like you and I would be walking. They are 11.5 inches, according to him, on the average. They excavated from under the overburden, which eliminates the possibility of them being carvings. So that's what people said, well, they were carved. Well, again, they excavated, and it's not carved. It was continued. It is called Taylor Trail. 7 of the footprints have toe prints, which you can see the dermal ridges and all that. This is the perfect Turvey fossil. Evolutionists have come up with some bizarre explanations. So some, and Patton was talking about this. He was giving a lecture, he said, to a group of students, and he made the statement that they can't explain this. And one of the students said, well, maybe it was dinosaurs had human feet, or maybe it was the other ones was, so again, very, very bizarre explanations. Then somebody said, well, maybe it was aliens that made these footprints. And he made a great point. If it was aliens that were smart enough to create us and all the things that they try to say, why were they barefooted? You know, were they not sophisticated to find? But anyway, that was a pretty good comment too. But it pumped the river dry over a 3-month period and exposed the longest consecutive dinosaur trail on the American continent. So again, these things were under the water and under another layer, so they diverted the river and looked at it. It is 154 dinosaur tracks over a 500-foot section. It's a clear and spectacular trail. As of 10 years ago, the only one that is longer than this is in Turkmenistan. And on the internet, I don't know anything about this. I looked this up the other day. They said there's one they found in France in 2019 that they say is longer. And I don't know anything about that.
The one in Texas,
This is still the one in Texas that we're talking about here, in Glen Rose, Texas. So they continued uncovering ground and found 100 more dinosaur tracks with 15 human tracks called the McFall Trail. Again, these were previously, so people say this was hoaxed or staged. It was previously covered up. They diverted the river, dug out the layer. There's 15 more human footprints in the same layer as the dinosaur footprints. Had to be at the same time. So the human tracks are made by a different human. It wasn't the same person, it was a different one. These are 10-inch prints, but they still are in a left-right pattern. The Burdick track is not a car track. It is an original impression. So they made an experiment, and Patton was talking about this. People say, well, science, do science. Well, they did science. They did some experiments, which are what you're supposed to do. So they did an experiment with like kids running through concrete and making various types, walking through it or running through it. And it's the same thing as what you see here at this trail. So they made an experiment with junior high kids by having them make tracks in the concrete. They made running tracks, walking tracks, standing tracks, etc. They look exactly like the tracks in Texas. There's also large mammal prints in some of these layers too. But the human footprints, my point is, they are human footprints in the same layer as the dinosaur footprints. Patton talked about Sonora, Texas has similar things like human tracks, not as long as these, but has some. Stinnett, Texas, he said, has human footprints in the Permian layer. In New Mexico, human footprints have been also found in the Permian layer. Turkmenistan, that I mentioned a moment ago, has a lot of dinosaur tracks. This plateau contains more than 3,000 footprints, dinosaur footprints, but there's human footprints too. As a matter of fact, he said that he arranged for the scientists there to kind of give them a tour, and said before he could go, the government over there fired that guy, so he couldn't show them these things. So it's just amazing. You know, they talk about being scientific. They don't want this evidence to get out. And we're all about, let's look at the evidence. They don't want this evidence to get out. They try to suppress these types of things. So this is the doctor that was fired. If you don't pronounce that name, you're welcome to. But he was later fired and had to leave the country. He said, if we speak about the human footprints, it was made by a human-like animal. That's what they have to tell people when they are explaining this. Incredibly, this footprint is on the same plateau where there are dinosaur tracks. So it's in the same layer. You see that, and again, that's over in Turkmenistan. So here's just a couple of pictures I found of, and I think it's at this site. So you can see the dinosaur footprint, kind of the three-toed thing as you look at that. Here is the one in Glen Rose, Texas. So you see dinosaur footprints here. I think I got another picture in a minute. And you see human footprints going this way. And my guess is, say, when were those made? My guess is when the floodwaters are rising. They're trying to hightail it to higher ground, I think. That's a better picture right there. So you can see the dinosaur footprints here. Nobody debates that. But here's the ones that look like human footprints. And if you were to try to walk in it, it would look just like your foot does. Like I said, they continued this, able to continue that track. And again, it was more human footprints when they looked at. Here's kind of a cast of this. And people say, well, that was some other animal. Sure looks human to me, right there. So again, this is what it looked like in those same areas where you saw the dinosaur footprint. All right. So again, let's wind this thing down with the dinosaurs. So if somebody says, what's the evidence of evolutionary dinosaur transitions? Something changing into a dinosaur changed into something else. Their narrative is the dinosaurs turned into birds and flew away. That makes a lot of sense. But that's what they'll try. Zero, zippo, none, nada dinosaur ancestors have ever been found. They've been looking for years and years and years, not one. Zero dinosaur transitions have been found. On family tree lines that are diagrammed. Again, when you look in a textbook, you see all these fancy diagrams about how this animal, all of that is fabricated. Most of that is fabricated. So the part connecting them, that's made up. There is none of that evidence. It's theoretical, hypothetical. There are several individual dinosaur kinds. Carl Warner has a chart showing connections. Now, I looked for this online to try to show that to you. I couldn't find it online. Again, they try to cover up stuff like that where you can't find it. It's hard to find some of these things. But again, there's zero transitions. These are supposed transitional fossils that they'll try to use to back up their theory, but again, these are not real. All the alleged transitional fossils that were so dear to the hearts of evolutionists a generation ago are now an embarrassment to them, whereas they will admit now, no, this was not a transition. So here's one that is now considered only a bird, not an intermediate fossil. So they were trying to say, well, that's kind of an in-between thing. It's not, it's just a bird. The famous horse series. This was a guy named Ernest Haeckel that he was a cheerleader of Darwin that tried to promote this thing about, well, the horse evolution. Again, it's been shown that is not the case. Still found in some textbooks, The famous horse series that is still found in some textbooks and museums has been discarded as considered a phantom illusion because it is not proof of evolution. People that know say this is not, there's nothing to that, doesn't show anything about evolution, but it's still in some textbooks. Darwin predicted that if evolution were true, many transitional fossils would be found. According to Darwin, a quote from his book, the number of intermediate and transitional links between all living and extinct species must have been inconceivably great. So that's what he said in 1859. So he predicted, if y'all study my theory, you're going to find thousands and thousands of transitional fossils. They found none. They've been trying for 164 years. They've not found one. He thought that millions of these would be found, and again, none have been found. Many evolutionists claim that they have found missing links to connect humans to its alleged animal ancestors. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Have they? What's true of these discoveries? And so we'll look at some of these. So here's some famous human ancestors that have been propagated over the years. Here's our ancestors that we have all evolved from. And so I kind of did the order in which these have been put out there to the public. So the Neanderthal man was discovered in 1856, and this was 3 years before Darwin's book. Java man, Piltdown man, Peking man was found in China. Nebraska man, Ramapithecus. Lucy, you probably have heard of Lucy. That was one that they found in 1974. There's been a lot of the news about, I'll share a few things about Lucy here in a little bit. So how about Neanderthal man? Also called Rhodesia man. He's just a man with arthritis. And most people now will say, well, Neanderthal man is just a man. So pretty much they've come along that line now. But again, for years and years, they use this as evidence of a less evolved, this somebody that's rising up. They're coming up, they're becoming more highly evolved. It was first found in 1856. They found the skull cap and some limb bones. It was diagnosed as a human with deformed vertebrae. Might be something like a scoliosis that we have sometimes in our day. It was obviously human, but the back was bent over. This was later used to advocate an ape coming up. So that was the narrative. This is an ape that is coming up, and he's standing straight up. Kent Hovind made this statement I thought was good. It was an old man with arthritis slowly going down, is what that was. And you think, again, from a biblical standpoint, this is obviously a post-flood person, or people that we find. How old does the Bible say that Shem was when he died?
Is it 595?
Yes, so about 600. So Noah was 950, and you see the ages started coming down, but Shem was still 600 years old. If you look at Shem's son, I don't remember that exact number, but our facts said was something like 430 or 440. So you had the next few generations that were living to be 400 years old. Well, if you live to be 400 years old, you might have a few more health problems. And so I think this is some really old people, is what I believe this is. The Neanderthal man's site in Krapina was later found and studied. Another almost complete skeleton was found in 1908. It was reconstructed by Marcel Bole to look ape-like. Again, this is something that was made up in the books to try to convince people of this. This is based on the preconceived evolutionary notions that he had. The faulty reconstruction was recognized in 1957. So in 1957, people said, well, this was fabricated a little bit. So they finally admitted that was not a real thing. Eventually, 300 skeletons were found here of the Neanderthal people. You say, what was their sizes? Very similar to ours. The average male was 5'9", the average female was 5'3". And that's pretty much the same average you see today. The skeletons had a 13% bigger brain than today. Might have been smarter than us. But again, as far as the numbers, very, very similar. It was nothing more than old people diseases, as I said. And I've been told, I don't know this, but I've been told this, the bones of your face never stop growing. And this includes eyebrow ridges in the back of the skull. So if you saw a skull of the eyebrow ridges being larger, the back of the skull being longer or whatever, this would be really, really old people. The skull never stopped growing. That's all that is. All right, Neanderthal today, most honest people recognize it as just a human being. There's no transition or no nothing. So here's, according to textbooks, what they will try to say. Again, they take this skull and draw this picture. again, it's based on their imagination. There's nothing to say that that's what it looked like. So school textbooks still portray Neanderthal as man's ancestor at some time. Neanderthals, they say, I'm not saying this, but the books say they lived between 30,000, 200,000 years ago is their narrative. They say that they're a separate species. And again, they point to the thick eyebrow ridge, etc., depict as inferior to modern humans. But again, very human-like. They're dead in caves, this sort of thing. Over 200 different fossils have been found over time. Here's a couple of scientific quotes what people now are saying about the Neanderthal. Detailed comparison of Neanderthal skeletal remains with those of modern humans have shown that there is nothing in Neanderthal anatomy that conclusively indicates locomotor, manipulative, intellectual, linguistic abilities inferior to those of modern humans. And again, I don't know who this guy is. I don't think he's a friend of creationists, but he admits they're just humans. Another scientist here. Despite their stocky body build and their stocky skull shape, there is no hard evidence to say that Neanderthals were in any way inferior intellectually to modern man. They're known to have made sophisticated flint tools, built huts out of animal skins, and had control of fire. They buried their dead. Here's another one. Most anthropologists recognize burial as a very human and a very religious act. But the strongest evidence that Neanderthals were fully human and of our species is that at 4 sites, Neanderthals and modern humans were buried together. So again, in the same, if y'all picture what that's saying, again, that kind of throws this narrative on its ear. In the same thing where you have fully human, you see Neanderthals buried in the same region. Again, it's really old people, is what I think that is. All right. So initial reconstructions were discovered to be wrong. Again, these pictures were fabricated. They're made up there. So what do we now know about Neanderthals? 100% human, brain capacity, 200 cc's larger than average. They used jewelry, used musical instruments, made cave paintings, buried their dead, capable of speech, and interbred with Homo sapiens, modern humans, and Neanderthals intermarried. All right, Cro-Magnon man. This was an 1868 discovery. I'll share a couple things with you about that. Cro-Magnon man has been used in the past as an evolutionary human link. 5 skeletons were originally found in France in 1868. However, it is now known and accepted that Cro-Magnon man was modern in every respect. So at one point, they said this is an evolutionary link. I looked this up online to see, and they pretty much, even online, they admit it's just a human being. But you wonder, how many school kids in the late 1800s, early 1900s had their faith destroyed by textbooks saying, "Oh, here's a link. Here's a missing link." Java man in 1891. Java man, whose scientists call Homo erectus, was made from a few scraps found in 1891 in Java, Indonesia. A Dutch anatomist named Dr. Eugene Dubois hired convicts to look for missing links. He took an ape's skull cap, 3 human teeth, plus a human thigh bone, found a year later 50 feet away, and assumed they went together, declaring that he had found the missing link. The fossils were said to be 500,000 years of age. They weren't connected, but he put these things together and said, here's Java man. So that's Java man. An ape, part of an ape skeleton, human skeleton, they put together and said, here's a missing link. Dubois hid the fact that he also found 2 normal human heads in the same area that he found the human thigh bone. So the human thigh bone belonged to the human head that he had found. In 1940, he admitted this deceit almost 50 years later. Java man is now admitted to be a hoax, but many of these things are still being used in textbooks today and taught as truth. I don't know if it's still in textbooks or not, but it's now known. It's been known for, how long ago? 83 years. It's been known for 83 years. This was a hoax. He admitted it 83 years ago. Kids still, I don't know if they're still being taught that today or not. But again, think about from 1891 to 1940. For 50 years, this is science. It wasn't. Sad, deceitful. So here's Java man. This is a model made in 1922 from this skull. But again, discovered by Dubois in 1891. Here's some of the bones here, some original things. But again, he put together 2 different things. Piltdown, 1908. Piltdown man, same thing. It is now known to be a hoax. It's now known. The New York Times, I saw a picture of this headline. I wasn't living in 1912, but I saw a copy of this. But where it said the missing link has been discovered, and was talking about Piltdown man. Piltdown Man, we now know, is a hoax. It was announced in the New York Times in 1912 as a proof of Darwin's theory. In 1908, it had first been found in Piltdown, England, and that's why it was called Piltdown Man. It was discovered to be a hoax in 1953. So again, a time frame, what's the time frame there? 45 years. So for 45 years, this was put forth as science. Like in the Scopes trial that we talked about with y'all a few months ago, in 1925, the famous trial that kind of brought evolution to the forefront. Things like this were used as proof in that trial. Piltdown Man. Oh, here's proof of Java Man. Here's proof. We now know it wasn't. A human skull and an ape's jawbone have been filed down and put together. And nobody recognized it. That must have done a pretty good job of putting that together. Somebody saw that, but it was finally determined that that was the case. Later, when they started studying it, you could see file marks on the teeth. So again, why somebody because it never ceased to amaze me how people will try to scrutinize the Bible and they'll try to pick apart anything, and you still can't try to pick apart things in the Bible and say the Bible contradicts itself. Why don't they use the same standard here? Why don't they do the same thing with their discoveries and study it to the same degree? Really makes me angry, to tell you the truth. The bones had also been coated with chemicals to make them appear older. So again, this is something that they had done to try to make it look like a really ancient thing. The discoverer, Charles Dawson, was found to have had at least 38 fakes of other specimens that he had collected in his collection. So I don't know what those were. How many of those others did he try to do to confuse people and fake them out? So as I said a minute ago, it makes me sad, it makes me mad, but it makes me sad too. You wonder how many little kids sitting in a school classroom in various places had their faith destroyed by something like this that was a hoax. That's all that it was. All right. Here's a picture of this. It was announced that Darwin's missing link had been found. The discovery is published, as we said. For decades, Piltdown Man reigned supreme in our classrooms, textbooks, and museums. Scores of books, pamphlets, and articles were published about Piltdown Man. And again, here's the missing link. But again, it was said to be, we now know it was an ape jawbone that was glued on somehow together. The teeth had been filed down to make them human-like, etc. So very, very sad. Peking Man, 1921. Peking Man was made from a piece of skull first found in 1921 in Peking, China. In the same area, they also found smashed monkey skulls and human tools. And Kent Hovind, again, made this point. Says they were just eating monkey brains. Now, again, that's not a delicacy I would necessarily like, but that's considered to be a delicacy in some societies. So, again, the evolutionists have a hard time explaining that, where the monkeys sit themselves and knocking the brains out. But again, humans were doing that. They found 10 human skeletons perfectly normal in the same cave, where they supposedly found Peking Man, supposed to be the missing link. So you had, Hovind talks about it this way, you had a Stone Age period following the flood. And you think about if you had we kind of experienced that to a lesser degree in our time. Think about a Hurricane Sally that came through back in 2020. So Hurricane Sally, I don't know about y'all, I really found out, sometimes I like to think that I'm a tough macho guy. I was missing my electricity for about 5 days. I didn't know if I could function. So you think about, these cultures, post-flood civilization, and they got to rebuild society. So it's going to take a little while to do that. And so we'd expect them to use primitive tools for, a while after the flood. So people would have used primitive tools until society could be rebuilt and advanced. They were rebuilding the civilization. They may have been following herds and made the tools on the spot rather than carrying a lot of heavy tools around with them. But so anyway, Peking Man, just a man. Nebraska Man. This one is even, y'all gonna like this one, it's even better. A pig tooth was used as a basis for Nebraska Man. So that's what they found, a pig tooth. And based on the pig tooth, they made the entire man and his wife from this one tooth. That's pretty good science right there. They're really good to be able to, that's again, unbelievable. How? It's unbelievable they could just do that and pass off as science. This was first found in 1922, and it was dated to be 1 million years old by their things. In 1921, it had been proved that this was a pig's tooth. It was still cited. So again, within 6 years, this was shown to be a hoax. And again, it was still put in the textbooks for years and years. Hopefully it's not in the textbooks anymore. But it was still cited as proof of evolution even into the 1940s. By 1928, it was shown to be false. You're still having kids being shown that in textbooks, even at that time. So this is the picture that was done in the Illustrated London News. So from one pig tooth, you had the man and his wife. That's pretty good. That's good science. So they didn't have a complete skeleton. They didn't have a complete skull. They didn't have a complete jaw, but they drew this. So again, all they had was one tooth, now known to be a pig's tooth. All right. So this is the real Nebraska man right there.
Yeah.
You see the resemblance? I hear you. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it should have come from Arkansas.
All right. Here's another one. Australopithecus africanus. This was a discovery in 1924. Australopithecus africanus, which was said to be found in 1924, again was proven wrong in 1973. So again, it's now known that it was not anything like missing link, but again, it took almost 50 years to prove that wrong. So here's some things about this supposed species. His brain size overlaps chimpanzees. His jaws are similar to chimpanzees. His long arms are identical to chimpanzees. His upper leg bone is similar to chimpanzees. Large back muscles for tree dwelling. Hands similar to pygmy chimpanzee. Ape-like foot. Fingers and toes were long and curved, like in wrist. Ankle bone, angle for tree dwelling. Now, what's it sound like to you? Like a chimpanzee is what they found. Again, that was put out as something along that proof. This is a quote from Mr. Montague here. It says, the skull form of all Australopithecines is extremely ape-like. The Australopithecines shows too many specialized and ape-like characteristics to be either the direct ancestor of man or of the line that led to man. It's just a chimpanzee. But again, this was published in 1958. So again, how many of these have been still propagated as evidence? I don't know. Ramapithecines, 1930. Found in India in 1930, was considered to be a human ancestor based on some jaw fragments and a few teeth. So again, on that, they were able to come up with this drawing that you see here. More fossil evidence was found in the 1970s. Baboons in Ethiopia have the exact same teeth structure as Ramapithecines. Is now discarded as a possible missing link. It may still be used in some places as evidence, but people that know will admit this is not. So it had been published as factual evidence of human evolution worldwide for years and years and years. Again, it's just, again, like I said, it makes me mad and sad at the same time that these are the evidences of the so-called missing links that kids have been taught in school, college students have been taught in school for a long, long time. So Ramapithecines of the claim, 14 million year old intermediate between ape-like creatures and humans. So what they drew, so here's what they drew. Again, the truth. Again, a baboon in Ethiopia is what this was. And so it has now been, at least in the people that know, they have been dropped it from this scenario of being an ancestor to us. But again, this is what they found. All right, so again, that's all Ramapithecines is. All right, the most famous one is Lucy, and y'all have all heard of Lucy, and share a few things with you about her that I found. Another of the Australopithecus africanus, discovered in Ethiopia in 1974 by Donald Johanson. And it's, ironically, it's a fact, he discovered it 2 weeks before his grant money ran out. He was highly motivated, you might say, to find something. And so he did. He found something. About 40% of a 3-foot skeleton is complete. So a 3-foot skeleton, that's Lucy. They dated it to be 3.5 million years old, claimed to be bipedal, that Lucy walked upright. So what is the evidence that you have here? All right, so the evidence that they will say you have an arm-leg ratio of 83.9%. The hip pelvis looks like she was walking upright. Knee joint walked upright. Digging deeper, what do we find? The leg bone was broken in two places and one end was crushed. So that invalidates the ratio up here that they talked about. The hip pelvis was incomplete and thus was reshaped to make it look as if it walked upright. Again, that's not something I found, but they reshaped it to make it look that way. The knee joint was found over 1 mile away and 200 feet deeper in strata from the rest of the bones. So you'd like to know the truck that hit Lucy to knock her knee 200 feet. I mean, it's almost humorous if it wasn't so serious. Fossil remains of two different creatures fitted to form a make-believe creature. And what was Lucy? A chimpanzee. That's what she was. So what's the summary that we see of these hominid fossils, these supposed missing links? Neanderthal man is now accepted as just a human being. Java man was artificial. Piltdown man was a hoax. Nebraska man, an extinct pig. Ramapithecus, an orangutan. Lucy, a made-up creature. And so again, none of these things. So again, they're espoused to try to disprove what we believe. It is not. All right, let me see. So this is a quote from Stephen Jay Gould. So the extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record persists as the trade secret of paleontology. It's not something that is out there for public consumption. They don't want people to know that, but they can't find any. The evolutionary trees that adorn our textbooks have data only at the tips and nodes of their branches. The rest is inference, however reasonable, not the evidence of fossils. So he still believes it's reasonable to connect them with the zero evidence, to connect all these things like they try to do. The fossil record is of little use in providing direct evidence of the pathways of descent of the phyla or of invertebrate classes. Each phylum with a fossil record had already evolved its characteristic body plan when it first appeared. So far as we can tell from the fossil remains, that no phylum is connected to any other via intermediate fossil types. Indeed, none of the invertebrate classes can be connected with another class by a series of intermediates. All that's saying is that these types of things that you see, they appear in the fossil record all at once, looking exactly like they do today. That's what you find. There's no evidence of any thing evolving from anything else. All right. Thank you again for your good attention on that. And again, we're getting close to winding this material down.